Hello, Tonya. Happy Tuesday. How's your day going?
It feels like it's like 3 Thursdays from now. It doesn't feel like Tuesday. I have tech family members coming though. They already shipped out my Synology and hard drives, and I told you they do not play. I've ordered from them so much they get my stuff out, and I got a notice saying that it should arrive actually today. So I'll check sometime this week. That, and then I also ordered my starter kit, which is also in the mail.
Dude, how are you gonna keep away from it?
I don't know. I usually when stuff comes like I have a new keyboard I haven't touched because I don't want anything to like derail me.
What'd you
Like
get?
it's a Max recommended it. He had, you know how they have the split keyboards? It's one of those.
Like one of these?
Oh, nice. No, mine is bigger. Mine is it's in a box somewhere. Hold on.
I gotta see this.
Yeah, I have extra keyboards. So this isn't it, but it's like one of these, like it's like a split keyboard. So
Okay.
it's like a big, yeah, but it's in a box. I would have to find it.
Oh man, you got some goodies stacked up then.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna really I'm gonna have to start with the Synology. I'm really hoping that's gonna help me with the storage issues, and then I can wait to get addicted to the Raspberry Pi.
Yeah, the Synology will be really easy. I mean, it takes you like a couple minutes to get set up. The only thing that takes any amount of time is it does a update process at the beginning. That's it.
That's it? Okay.
Those things are phenomenal though. You know where your router is, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, all you're gonna do is plug that into your router. You got some Ethernet ports on it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's it.
Okay. It should come with a cord. I didn't even think about a cord. It has to come with a cord. If it doesn't, I think I have a YouTube one.
I'm pretty sure it does. If it does, I would be surprised if it doesn't. But then again, I don't know because I've opened it up before in the past and I don't think I got one.
It's not a big deal. I'm pretty sure I have it. I have a ton of cords and stuff. And if not, I'll just grab one.
Okay. Hey everybody. Happy Tuesday. Phobelia, did you figure out that issue that you were running into? Did you figure out how to enable DNSSEC?
Thank you. I found it.
Awesome. Yeah, I was doing work stuff and didn't see it until like 30 minutes ago. So
I just went in and started kind of looking around and pressing tabs and stuff. I found it.
Nice. Very nice. I'll give our usual 4 minutes to let folks trickle in. In terms of toys, Latonia, that you need to continue to purchase and constantly be spending money on, I think the other toy that's pretty high up there are Buckyballs. Have you ever seen these?
No. What is that?
So this is like a big bundle of magnets.
Oh wow!
So each
Those
one of
are
these
little tiny beads.
Yeah, each one of these are all magnetized.
Oh, that's
so you can do like little fun shapes with it. But I'll tell you what, the coolest thing is just take it in your hands and just crush it.
It's like bubble wrap.
Hear it.
It's like bubble wrap. Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, everybody needs that. That was one of my favorite things about being in the office before I went remote was everybody would always just have a bunch of desk toys. So you could just go around to people's desks and play with whatever. Like one guy I worked with had like one of those little sand Zen things. Have you guys seen it before with the little fork and stuff? Um, oh, Fabelia, you have one? That's so cool.
I know, but it sits on my windowsill with my plants. I think I'm gonna have to
What
take
are
it
you
off my
supposed to?
windowsill.
What are you supposed to do with it?
You just take the little fork thing and you just kind of play in the sand with it. You make all types of designs and stuff.
Oh,
It's supposed to be
okay.
relaxing.
Okay.
Yeah.
The guy I knew, he always made just neat rows and he was just content with that. And whenever somebody would
Yeah.
come to his desk and make a mark in it, oh, that would really set him off. What do you, what do you have, Brandy?
I found a couple from Mind Games in the mall. I have this one, it disconnects.
Oh my God.
Then I have a COVID ball. It's just a squeaky ball or something. It's on the other side of the room, but yeah, I have this one that just expands and turns
That
around.
is cool.
Did you say COVID ball?
Yeah, wait, one
That's
second.
so funny.
COVID ball.
It's a COVID flush. Is that the regular variant or the Delta variant?
Regular.
Have you named it?
Uh-uh.
Oh, good. It's probably bad luck.
I don't know if anyone else has these, but the cool thing on my desk is this Hannibal Lecter Funko Pop. So I don't know if anybody else collects Funko Pops, but if you do, totally mention them and tell me what they are because I think they're cute.
Wait, Kelly, are you the kind of person that keeps them in the boxes? Is that the one that you've taken out?
Maybe, Nathan, maybe it
Do
is
you
the
have
one I
a
took out.
Do you have a Funko Pop wall?
I don't. I
Oh,
do not
okay.
have a Funko Pop wall. I'm not, yeah, I'm not there yet, if ever. Probably never, frankly. I just really liked this one, so I had to take it out of the box because I couldn't let Hannibal suffocate in the box like that.
That's cool. I don't have any Funko Pops. I did think about buying into those amiibos for a while, but then I went to the store and saw how much they were. Oh my gosh, they're crazy expensive.
I really want a Zen garden now. No, we've talked about it. Like pushing sand into straight rows, I would find that deeply relaxing and satisfying. So I'm gonna have to get a Zen garden.
Anybody else have desk toys? Do you guys just sit there and work all day?
I'm a notary, so usually when I'm in an office, I like to have like stuff for people to snack onto as you're shuffling through their papers. So I usually have
Oh,
like toys and stuff all over. For the holidays, I put up little trees and things. Like I'm always doing stuff. But yeah, I like to keep it fun if possible.
yeah, candy's a good move. A seasonal desk. I've never heard of something described like that. Like actually making a seasonal theme for your desk. I've been remote for 3 years now. These things are long gone to me. Seasonal desk.
I used to work in a WIC office like 2 lifetimes ago. So because I had clients coming in every day and most of those clients had kids, I got used to kind of decorating my office and my desk with, like toys and different holiday themes and coloring pages and fun stuff like that. And it's just kind of always stuck with me ever since.
Yeah, maybe I should just not be lazy. Maybe I should do the same thing. Brielle, thank you for joining us. Will you please show us one of your desk toys? Oh, wow. I think you're muted.
Sorry, I was at the dollar store the other day and I saw the Halloween stuff and I just could not resist. So I have a lovely bouquet on my desk.
Wow, that's with eyes and everything. That's incredible.
With eyes, right? It's my most fun holiday to decorate for. So yeah.
Okay, let's jump right in. So questions about the homework from last night. I feel like DNSSEC is pretty straightforward. Did anybody run into any problems trying to enable DNSSEC on their Namecheap domain? I know Shaw had a question about it. Anybody else have any issues? DNSSEC. So I'm going to share my screen and show the solution, I think, to one of Shaw's questions. So you go into Namecheap. You may not see a DNSSEC option if, oh, come back. Here we go. You may not see a DNSSEC box if you're not using the Namecheap basic DNS. So if you are using their web hosting DNS, and I think the same is true for custom DNS. If you're using either of these two things, you won't get a DNSSEC option. So basic DNS is Namecheap providing the DNS for you. So you need them to manage your DNS in order for them to be able to provide you with provide you with a DNSSEC RRSIG or one of those addresses. So if you ran into an issue where you weren't able to see that, just make sure that you're not using the web hosting. And you wouldn't want to be using their web hosting anyways because your domain is pointed towards your Heroku app. So we don't want to use the Namecheap web hosting. Hopefully that answers your question, Shaw, and if anybody else was seeing the same thing.
Hi, Nathan. Yeah, thank
Hey.
you for finding that. Actually, after I text you, I played with that, and it's all basically I was able to point my domain name to Heroku, and I was able to type the domain name and just get there. But then I lost all email services, like through Gmail. There are a few email addresses.
Oh, you have
and
email
then-
addresses for your domain?
Exactly, yes, because this is
Oh.
actually for a business. They receive, and so they call me and said, "Hey, we are not receiving emails." Anyway, so I added so I had to go back and select, basically disable that the Namecheap basic, because when you have basic, it works with Heroku. You can point to a domain, but you cannot send and receive emails.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, probably I have to talk to their customer service maybe and see if there is a solution for us. There must be a solution for it.
Yeah, so I'll tell you, this is just a quick side tangent. When you're talking about emails, you need to have MX records. And so far,
I added all the 5 MX records that was on their website.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, with if it's Namecheap web hosting DNS, it works perfectly fine. You can send and receive email. Now it's like that. But if the moment I switch it to a Namecheap basic DNS, then I can point to my domain with Heroku, but there will be no email.
So are you using Namecheap's email service?
No, the domain name, like a username at domain.com.
Who called you and said that your business email wasn't working?
It's it's a business. They are using the email.
Oh,
Yeah.
they're using your
And actually,
email?
my capstone is for a business. So yeah, so they use the.
You already have customers on your capstone?
No, actually, I'm designing the website for a business.
Oh,
I have
holy
enabled
smokes.
Gmail, workspace for them. I mean, they
Well,
didn't have. They were using other email services, but I was like, yeah, I will do your website and also Gmail because it's better for them, and also cheaper.
yeah, I mean, it sounds like you kind of know what you want to do. If you want to forego DNSSEC, by all means, that's your decision. And if you want to stick with the settings that were working for you, yeah, let's talk about it. Let's talk about it maybe in a one-on-one or something, because
Sure.
I definitely can help you get those MX records working, get your email working, because I have had to do the same thing for my stuff.
Yeah, email is working, but then the Heroku domain name doesn't point to it, doesn't work. That's the thing. Either one, I have to either choose Heroku domain or email for now.
Do you want to just buy another domain for the Heroku?
Oh, then okay. But then I can point it to the same domain name, like that is using the email.
No, you would have a separate domain.
No.
Let's talk about it.
Okay, yeah, sure. Yeah, thanks.
Latonia, let's talk about so one of the questions from yesterday was around certbot and let's encrypt. So I kind of briefly went over this, and if you guys want to come to office hours this weekend, I'll show you how to provision your own SSL certificates. That's one thing that we can do. So I'll go a little bit more in depth into this during office hours, but just to clarify what these websites are doing. These websites create the certificate. They create the accreditation for your website. So they are responsible for giving you an artifact, a certificate, this tangible thing that prove that you are the owner of the domain. And whenever anyone goes to visit that website, your certificate is loaded and it's displayed in their browser. That's what powers that lock icon in the URL. So HTTPS by itself is HTTP plus this encryption. And HTTP is a protocol, and so is HTTPS. So I'm not sure, Latonia, what Ryan is referring to, but hypertext transfer protocol is a protocol, just like HTTPS is a protocol. And so the browser and server can communicate on their own. Yeah, so again, just to summarize some of the conversation from yesterday, HTTPS, all it is it's setting up that secure channel for you to send normal HTTP requests and all of your typical HTTP activities through. And this, again, I'll talk about it in office hours if you guys want, if that's useful, but all this is doing is, instead of going to Namecheap and saying, okay, for 30 or 20 or whatever dollars a month, generate that certificate, that accreditation. Instead, this certbot and Acme SH lets you do that yourself for free. That's all that is. Okay, I got another question before we jump into material for today. I got another question. So the DNSSEC stuff was hopefully pretty straightforward. Go to Namecheap, flip a box. That's kind of the end of this story. How are folks doing with using HTTPS in their capstones? Is anybody taking a look at that?
I'll jump in. This is Latonia. I saw that I already had it in. And then when I went to my front end to check those URLs, I didn't have it, but they're being called from the back where it is there. So it looked like I was all set, but that's why I started the whole conversation with Ryan around securing the local host, if that's necessary. And I saw that there's only special cases where you would really want to do that or need to do it. So I don't know. I mean, I don't feel like I really learned anything just because it was already set. So.
Well, so I'm actually not expecting too many people to make changes to their capstone, and let me show you why. So pretend like this is a React component. So we would have our const app equals, then this, then let's just make this React component return a series of list items. Okay, is everybody familiar with list items in HTML? So this is going to be, let's pretend like this is a nav bar and it has links to all of our different locations in our app. Okay, so here's one item in the list. Oops. Yep, okay, so we're good. All right, so let's say that we want to have a navigation, a link, an href. Let's say we want to have somebody be able to navigate to the About page. So what you could do is something like this, HTTPS :// Nathan's web store .com about. Okay, so that's our href, that's our link, and we'll put some text and say that's the about link. So if we render this, it's going to render with a link. We can click on the about link and it'll take us to the about page, the about URL. Does that make sense? So if you structure your links like this, then if you are using HTTP for the homework, I'd like you to switch from HTTP to HTTPS. Pretty simple, right? If you're using HTTP links, switch to using HTTPS. So not super involved for the homework. But it's kind of a trick question because why would you build your link like this? If the about page is hosted on your capstone, then all you really need to do is set your link to /about. So what I'm really hoping is a lot of people say for their homework, I didn't need to do anything to use HTTPS because I'm using purely relative links. I don't have any absolute links in my homework. So you can sidestep the whole problem by building all of your links in this relative fashion, or maybe in that fashion, depending on how your website is set up. So really the homework from last night, I'm hoping that most people say, DNS set, got it, HTTPS, I don't have to worry about it because I'm not using any direct links. And if you are using direct links, make sure they're HTTPS. Any questions? Okay. All right, so let's jump. Kyle, yes. And also for any backend communication where you can't do a relative link, or you're doing something like a const axios.get and you're making a get to your backend, that should also be HTTPS. We should be loading data from our backend using an encrypted channel. Good call, Kyle. I forgot about the API request in Axios.
So Nathan, that's what I was talking about in my example. So are you saying, because I went in and I put an S in, nothing changed, nothing broke, so I took it out because I was like, why am I going to put it in if there's no? So are you saying I'm supposed to go back in and just put the S in because on the back end I have the S?
Yes, you should be using HTTPS everywhere. If you do a Control F and you find HTTP anywhere in your code, you should look at it and make sure that, and see if you can use HTTPS. Now, if it's a local host URL, then we don't need to worry about using HTTPS. But Yeah, use HTTPS wherever possible. And it should return the same thing. There should be no difference, no perceived difference between the two. But the difference is in what the difference is in the channel. So if you aren't encrypting it, then it can be snooped on or hijacked by anybody else. So that's why we're using HTTPS. Okay. All right. So let's dive in. Unless anybody has any other questions, let's go ahead and dive in. So today's going to be a bit more interesting. We're going to do some coding. And we're going to talk about authentication. So yesterday we talked about HTTPS and DNSSEC. This is the prerequisite. We're securing the communications before we dive in any further. Now we're going to talk about authentication. And all authentication is we're trying to prove who the user is that's visiting our website. Now, authentication has two parts. We want the users to know that the website they're visiting is authentic. That when you're loading google.com or nathanswebstore.com, when you're visiting a website, we want our customers to feel assured that they are actually visiting the server that they want. HTTPS helps with that because those certificates that we generate in order to enable HTTPS, those certificates include an accreditation that provides verification that the server is who they say they are, that the domain is controlled by the person that we expect to control it. So authentication has these two parts, proving that the server is authentic and they are who they say they are, which is taken care of by HTTPS. But then we're left with the other piece. How do we know when someone comes and visits our website? How do we know who they are? So when we go to Amazon.com and on the front page, if we've logged into it before, when we go to Amazon.com and it already has, when we first visit the website, it already has, Amazon's already picked out a bunch of stuff that we might find interesting on that home page. How does Amazon.com know who we are? And that's a question for all of you. How do these websites that you guys have already been visiting in your day-to-day use of the internet, how do these websites know who you are?
By your IP address or either, I don't know, like your device?
IP address, cookies, yep. Authentication, exactly. This is what authentication involves. Yep, and it's the info associated with our ID. So we go and we create an account on Amazon.com, and we use that as proof of our identity. Why you should care about this? I know a bunch of people have capstones that don't necessarily need to have a user login, but some of the reasons why you might be interested in this authentication piece and having users sign into your app is that it really creates this deeper engagement. When users return to your website and they have all of their preferences stored and all of their account information already saved, makes it really easy for them to buy something and come back and continue to funnel money into whatever your website is because you make it easy for them. And I know not everybody's capstone is about selling somebody something, but personalization, exactly like for Kyle's walkumentary, one idea I had was tracking what the user has visited so you can show almost like a burn down list of here's all the places that you haven't been to. So that personalization and that UX, that UX that you can achieve by just having the user sign in and prove who they are will lead to a deeper engagement, will lead to users coming back to your website. But the other part that you should care about a lot is that once you can verify who a user is, you can also audit what they're doing, which if your website is doing something, especially working with money or It's controlling other things. So like an admin site that controls, let's say like a sprinkler system or something like that. Once you have users logging into your app, you can audit what they're doing. And that audit trail is incredibly helpful for understanding not only if they do something nefarious, something evil, like let's say that they're trying to look for vulnerabilities in your website, not only can you use it for those kinds of security related tasks, but auditing is also really helpful for understanding what people are doing and how often they're doing it. So if you're able to prove who a user is, you can also see what kind of trends, what kinds of things they're doing on your website, which is really helpful to do early on, because sometimes when we're working on brand new projects, we don't really know what part of our project is going to be successful. We don't know if it's going to be the feature that we built or some little feature that we created. We don't know exactly what part of our product is going to be the most relevant to our customers. So by requiring them to log in and by putting a name to the different actions that they perform on your website, not only can you use it for security, but you can also use it for feature development, for understanding what parts of your product are really resonating with customers. And then also, authentication is a prerequisite to authorization, where authorization is the process by which we restrict what certain users can do. So like with Amazon.com, there's different roles that a person can have. They can just be someone visiting the website, haven't even logged in. They can be someone that's logged in and is shopping for items. They can be a reseller, which means that they get a whole Amazon.com panel for reselling and doing drop shipping and all that stuff. So they can be a merchant. There's all these different kinds of roles. And the only way to provide that functionality, to have those roles, you have to have authentication. You have to be able to tie a user, an IP address, a computer. You have to be able to tie a person to an identity. Okay. And we all kind of know what authentication means, just intuitively from working with other programs or different places, but we do authentication so often that most of the time we don't really realize it. Like when you need to go and dispute a charge at the bank, the first thing you do after you get through their whole automated computer nonsense and click through all the numbers and you finally get to a human person, the first thing that the person asks you is, verify you are who you say you are, either by giving me a debit card number or a PIN or a social security number. So authentication is all around us, and we do it every single day. An example of how we see it most commonly done on websites is through a username password. And then with multi-factor authentication, sometimes websites also ask us to prove that we have access to something as an additional means of verifying we are who we say we are. So we've all kind of know intuitively what authentication is, but this just sort of spells out in terminology what that is. So over the next couple of days, we're going to talk about different authentication mechanisms, and we're going to do most of a deep dive on OpenID Connect. And you all know what OpenID Connect is, but we're going to put a name to that terminology today. If I can blow this up on my screen. Nope, I can't. All right. So OpenID Connect, this is a specification that's used every time you click sign in with Google, sign in with Facebook, sign in with GitHub, sign in with Pinterest, sign in with any number of those different websites. And that's what we're going to work on today. We're going to go through an example of how to set that up on a website. We're not really going to talk so much about SAML. If we have time left, SAML is a form of authentication that you see at more enterprisey companies that use Okta and One Login and some of those apps. But we will have time to cover this week for the folks that I don't convince to use OpenID Connect. For those folks that continue to want to use username and password, I'm not going to leave you high and dry. But basic auth is the terminology for basic authentication is the terminology for using username and password, and we'll briefly touch on that closer to the end of this week. So today is all about deep diving into OpenID Connect, and I just described it. It's when you're presented with a login box on the website to log in using some other website, some other identity that another website controls. And we're going to talk about the flow of how that mechanism works. First, I'm going to give a high level kind of technical description of how that flow works. And then we're going to jump in and we're going to get to code so you can actually see this in practice. So when you use the sign in with Google, when you use the OpenID Connect specification, the steps look something like this. So the user will navigate to a website that has implemented OpenID Connect. And they'll click the button, whatever it is, Google, GitHub, etc. What happens is that immediately kicks off a redirect to whatever the website is that they've chosen to sign in with. And they'll complete their authentication over on that website. When you've signed into whatever that website is, and you verified that you have control over that account or that identity, that website will redirect back to yours. So you start out at your website, they click the button, they get sent over somewhere else, they complete authentication, and they come back to the website. When they come back to your website after they've completed that verification, they come back with a code. It's part of the OpenID specification. They come back with a code, and that code can be used to exchange from your website, exchange that one-time use only code for information about that user. So it usually contains, and we'll get into this here in a second, and I'll show you exactly what the payload looks like. But you exchange that code for a token. And then your website continues to use that token. And that token has a lot of useful information in it. Things like what the user's name is, what the user's email address is. Maybe it includes a picture of the user if they've uploaded one on Google or GitHub. Okay. Any questions? All right. So we're going to jump into a demo using Auth0. So what I want everyone to do is to go to their machine, and what we're going to do is we're going to add authentication onto Nathan's web store. I'd really prefer if folks stick with me and do this in Nathan's web store instead of on their capstone directly. So go to wherever on your machine, wherever you still have that copy of Nathan's web store. If someone doesn't still have it or can't find it, just let me know. And I'll also put it here in the slides. We're going to the front end. So Nathan's web store. So here is the GitHub link. And if you don't have it on your computer anymore, or you lost it and you want to just get it back, you can say in your terminal, git clone. And here's the URL. Okay.
Can you pop that in the chat or in Slack so I can recon it? Thank you.
Thank you, Kelly. In fact, if you're not sure what state you left this Nathan's Web Store in, feel free to just delete that folder and clone down a fresh copy. It's up to you. If you can npm start and it displays a front end, then you're in good shape.
And Nathan, I'm sorry, to move something, it's in the what you want to move to where you want to move it to? Or is that wrong?
MV takes two arguments, right? It takes what you want to move to where, yeah, exactly.
Thank you.
And if you do a git clone, a fresh git clone, don't forget to do npm install so you get all those node modules. So just give it another minute or so for people to get set up. If anybody's having any issues getting going with Nathan's Web Store locally, just let me know.
And just double checking for the install npm-I, or was it I-S?
It's just npmi.
Oh, okay. Thanks.
And if you run npm start, you should be greeted with something that looks like this. If you can see this on your screen after you run npm start, then you're all set. And it looks like somebody woke up the backend for me. Thank you, whoever did that. Whoever paid the 7-something seconds to wait for the backend to warm up. You know, while folks are still getting their local environment set up, this capstone, Nathan's lovely capstone, this is a great example of a project where you would want to have authentication, because I need to know who people are so I can charge them. Once they add things to the cart, I need to know who they are so I can prepare the shopping cart, take their billing address, their mailing address, all that sort of stuff. You know, there's lots of situations where it's really cut and dried for when you need authentication. Like if you're just doing a portfolio or you're just doing a blog or something like that, you're purely using static files, then the argument could be made, you know, we don't really need authentication, but authentication is incredibly useful for the situations where you need it, where you're actually needing to prove who the user is. So even if you aren't doing it in your capstone necessarily, this is a good skill to have. Okay. So once we have our local, again, somebody, if you have a problem getting set up, just throw it in chat and I'll stop. But we're going to leave that for right now, and we're going to go and do all the paperwork to get set up with that login box. So I'm going to ask everyone to go to a website called auth0.com. And I'd like everybody to create an account on auth0.com. And when you finish making an account, I don't believe it's going to ask you for a credit card. I don't think I put a credit card on Auth0 yet. When you get done creating your account, you should end up at a dashboard that looks something similar to my screen. You won't have any activity yet necessarily, but no, you do not need to start at the back end.
I set up an account earlier today just to test some stuff out, and I did want to confirm it doesn't ask you for a credit card or any kind of payment information when you set it up.
Awesome, thank you, Kelly. Kelly, did you have to, when you created a new account, did it ask you to create a tenant?
It did. It did ask me to create a tenant.
Okay, so when folks, it's been a while. I didn't actually go from start to finish creating an Auth0 account, so it's been a while. If it asks you to create a tenant, just call it whatever you want. You can call it Nathan's web store if you want to help link it up with this project that we're running. You will want a tenant for each project that you work on. So if you decide to use Auth0 for your capstone, you'll want to create a tenant for your capstone. So when it asks you for a name for your tenant, just do something to the effect of Nathan's web store. Personal account. Yeah. Or if you want to do small business, I think maybe if you hit small business, it's going to be a bit more aggressive about asking for a credit card. So personal account probably is the way to go. Okay. Thumbs up. Are folks able to get into Auth0, create a tenant, see a dashboard that looks something similar to mine? Anybody run into any problems? A couple folks with thumbs up. Yeah. Okay, if you still need a tenant, if you click up here on the dashboard, there should be a little drop down up here in the top left that lets you hit create tenant or something to that effect. You may have one already and just didn't know. All right. So once you have a tenant set up, once you are logged into that dashboard, I want you to go under applications. So over here on the side, click on applications, then there's another drop down, click applications again. Should take you to a page that looks something like this. When you set up Auth0, it's going to create some default stuff in here. You could just ignore that. We don't want to use the default app that is provided to us. Okay, and then we want to hit create application. There's a lot of different options here, but what we're looking for is the single page web application. And you can give this any name that you want. I think a really good choice would be to associate it with Nathan's web store. So calling it Nathan's web store would be a good idea, but you call it whatever you want.
Nathan, I apologize. I'm just a step behind you. So I'm in the applications.
You're in applications? Okay, click the create application button.
Yes, I am.
Okay, and then hit single page web application. Are you seeing something different?
Nathan, I'm sorry, my internet's acting crazy. I'm in the applications tab.
Yep.
I'm not sure if I'm clicking the first, second, or third option so that I can.
The first, click applications again inside of that expanded list. Okay.
Got it. Okay.
and then click on that create application. And the application type is the single page.
Thank you. Sorry about that.
No worries. So I've already got one created, so I'm going to jump in here. So Auth0 is pretty awesome, and they have really good docs. I'd put it up next to Sentry in terms of just having really good documentation. So if you click on React, you don't have to do this, but if you clicked on React, it would give you a really nice rundown of how to do what we're about to do. So if you get stuck, when you get to the homework, if you get stuck and you feel like you're lost, you can also use this as a resource for troubleshooting. Okay. But what we're really interested in is the settings tab. So if you click on the settings tab, this is wiring up the login box that we're about to show on my capstone. These are all the raw settings. And there's a couple important ones in here I want to call out and some that we need to make changes to. Okay. If you scroll down, we're looking for a section called application URIs. And there's a number of different boxes here, but the important ones that I'm going to call out are these three right here: allowed callback URLs, allowed logout URLs, and allowed web origins. So what this is saying, what each of these three settings are saying, is this login box will only work at this address, or will only work for these addresses, because you can put multiple addresses in here. So what I want everyone to enter into each of these three boxes, the callback, the logout, and the web origin, I want you to add HTTP localhost 3000 into each of those. If we don't add that, if we went and started implementing the login box and we didn't add those, the login box would break. These three boxes are scoping the login box to only our app, to only where our app is running, which means that nobody else can take this app, nobody else can take this login box and use it on their website. So this is locking it down to just the URLs you specify. And we're saying localhost 3000 because that's where Create React app runs. Okay. All right, once you've added HTTP localhost 3000 to each of these boxes, scroll down to the very, very bottom, and there's a Save Changes button, and use that and hit Save. Okay. All right, so I've got the same steps in the slides, so we can jump ahead. All right, now we get to the coding part. So we have the Auth0 dashboard, the Auth0 stuff set up. Now we can work on adding the login box to our code. So to do that, we're going to install this Auth0-React library. So let's go back to Nathan's web store. And from the root of this folder, from the very top level of this folder, we're going to run this command: npm install -- save auth0 auth0-react. Everybody with me? Doing good? Okay. Okay. All right, now let's get into the code. So let's go ahead and open up that folder with our favorite text editor. So we got the library installed. We have the auth0.com dashboard set up. Now it's time to write some code. Okay. So we need to start with the index.js. So move into the index.js folder. The first thing we need to do is we need to create a React provider. Yep, I can scroll, zoom in, sorry about that. We need to create a React provider, and I have this here in the slides, so you can copy and paste. But we need to create this Auth0 provider. So take this and use it to surround the app. And we're going to import the Auth0 provider from the Auth0 library. And when I say we're going to surround the app, I mean that we're going to have an open tag for Auth0 provider with some of these properties. We're going to put our app inside, and then we're going to close the Auth0 provider tag. Quick question, how many people are familiar with the React provider? I know folks have seen use effect, all the hooks, use effect, use state. How many folks have seen providers?
I'm familiar with providers.
So, sorry?
Oh, sorry. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah, I was saying I'm familiar with it. Like it's like I think context uses providers.
Right. So what React providers allow us to do is they're special React components. Although they don't necessarily render something, they don't have to render something, but they essentially allow context to be passed down to the children that it surrounds. So what we're going to see is that by creating this Auth0 provider, we're going to be able to pull Auth0 information inside of our app. And I would strongly encourage folks to check out the React provider paradigm. But I'm going to show how we're going to use it with Auth0, and it's pretty straightforward. Once you've seen one provider, most providers kind of look the same, or how they're used is functionally the same. Kelly, is that an accurate description of React providers? Do you want to throw in?
Doing a great job covering the React providers. I was actually taking a second to see if I could find like an article or YouTube video or something for people to reference later. I know people kind of like that, so.
Yeah, that would be a good idea. And I'll be honest, I don't usually write a whole lot of providers. Most libraries that you use, they'll sometimes come with a provider. So it's almost a bit more important to understand how to use one than it is to necessarily write one. And I'll definitely show everyone how to use a provider today.
Is that a typo? It says redirect URI. Should it be URL?
Good question. No, URI is nomenclature for a uniform resource identifier, which is
Okay.
different than a uniform resource location.
Got it.
I don't actually know the difference between a URL and a URI. It has to do with a location doesn't necessarily represent a discrete item, and a URI is I'm just talking. I don't actually know. And honestly, I've never been quizzed on the difference between the two, but they have different meanings. So, all right, everybody good? Everybody up to this point? Everybody able to successfully import the Auth0 provider? Cool. So if we run npm start, I'm getting the feeling that this will break things, probably. There's a chance it won't break things. There's a chance it will. Ah, no, it breaks nothing. So we just use the Auth0 provider. Nothing has changed in our app. And the reason why is, yes, we've set up the Auth0 provider, but we're not doing anything with it. We need to actually integrate deeper into it in order to receive authentication from the app. Auth0 provider is not defined. Don't forget to do an import statement. So something that looks sort of like this. And if that's not working, then it's likely that the npm install didn't work. So don't forget to also run the install to get that library. And I'll blow this up for folks that want to just steal that. Here, actually, I'll paste it.
That would be great. Imports.
Yeah, auto import's great when it works. Sometimes it doesn't. Kyle, did that fix your issue? Susan?
Yeah, I was
Are
just
you-
thinking we probably needed to import something when I saw that. So that's good. Thanks.
Brielle, you're getting the same issue. Did you also remember to import?
Yep.
You did do an import?
Mhm.
Did you make sure to install Auth0 React?
I did. Did we need to use that other login line from the slide? Because I did not use the HTTPS at the bottom of slide 64.
Oh, no, this is just a link to
Okay, yeah.
additional content. Yeah, no, you don't need to use
I ran the npm install without a problem. Said it worked.
that.
Okay.
You can't share your computer, can you?
No, but I noticed that my version of the web store was not your latest version. There were some things I had to adjust to help it compile. I went to just the GitHub, but probably something else. But it says that. I'll work on it. Thanks.
Yeah, actually, probably the easiest thing to do is to blow away that folder and just clone down a fresh copy so you have the latest. It's your call, though, if you want to cobble it along. Okay. Actually, we are at time for break. So let's take a 10-minute break and come back at 6:42. For folks that it's not working, Brandy, do you want to share your screen? Show me what you got.
Yep.
Okay, stop. There you go. Okay. So we've got Auth0 provider. That looks great. What's the issue? I think you're muted.
I don't know. It's this.
Oh, Auth0 provider is not defined. You're at localhost 3000. Okay. Let's go back to the terminal and hit Control C. Let's stop running. Okay. And then over on the left, open up your package.json. Yep. Okay. And then Auth0, Auth0-React. Yeah, so you've installed the Auth0. Okay, great. Run npm start in here. There you go.
Thank you.
Yeah, I don't sometimes. Oh, you know what it is? Did you restart npm start after you did the npm install? Did you
Yeah.
have, you did? Oh, man, I don't know. So if you install a library and you don't restart your npm start, sometimes it won't pick it up. But if you did that, I have no idea. Brielle, I want to help you. I don't want you to have to come back and like.
I just did what Brandy did because I had just saved it. I didn't stop the React and restart it, and now it's good. So
Awesome.
yeah.
Awesome. Glad to hear. Okay. back. All right, go back to share my screen. Okay, so we should be at the point where we still have Nathan's web store. When we run it, it really shouldn't be doing much. Should just kind of show the same sort of thing. We shouldn't be hitting any compile errors, or we shouldn't be having problems viewing the website locally. All right. Now, before we jump into how we would use this Auth0 provider in our code, we need to fill this out with the correct credentials. So you can think of these credentials as being like a bunch of API keys. We need to hook the API keys from Auth0 up to our code. So if we go back to Auth0 and we look at our dashboard, you would again click on applications, get to where the application you created was. So here's mine. You're going to click into your application, go into the settings again. So again, we went over to the left from the dashboard, we clicked on applications again. Then we went to the settings for our application we just created.
Excuse me, Nathan.
Yep.
This is Latonia. So I did that. I did applications, create application. And all I have is a default app. It says generic client ID. Is that right? I feel like it should.
Oh, I think you forgot to finish creating. So when you go into here to create the application,
Yep.
Make an application, call it something like Nathan's
Yeah, I did that.
web store. Hit create. Should create a new application for you. Did you get a screen like this?
Single page. I did. Yeah, I had all of that before.
So you're positive that you clicked on applications and not APIs.
I feel like I'm positive, but now that you say that, but I saw the exact screens that you did. It doesn't matter. I just did it and I have it again.
Okay, you got one. Cool.
Yeah, but do I have to redo what you did last time? If so,
No, you just need, oh yeah, sorry. Yeah, you will need to go into the settings and inside of the callback URLs and the logout URLs and the web origins, you want to add HTTP localhost 3000.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I'll just
all three of those.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. And then I'm gonna delete mine because you guys should do this. I'm just deleting this because I don't need this one. All right, so once you have your application, you'll click on it and then again, go to the settings tab. This basic information up here, this is what you could call API keys. There's a client secret here. You should never need that. But the two things that we do need are the domain and the client ID. So take and click the copy button for the domain and paste it in here for the domain. And then for the client ID, do the same. I said these are like API keys, but we all know at this point that we should protect our API keys if at all possible. So not committing them, not leaking them. But these aren't the same sort of API keys in that sense. This can be safely committed to GitHub. This can be loaded into the browser. All this is this is saying this is the domain to use for the login box, and this is the ID associated with it. Now, had we done something like put our client secret in here, which we definitely should not do, then we would be concerned about having those things in GitHub and having those things deployed. But just the client ID and the domain, perfectly fine to commit, perfectly fine to have visible on the website. Okay. All right. Now, if we hit save and we ran npm start and all of that, again, nothing would really happen. So let's go ahead and jump to the next step, which is consuming Now that we have this Auth0 provider set up with the correct credentials, let's consume whatever functionality this Auth0 provider gives us. Okay. So the way providers work is that they pass down a context to all the descendants that are contained inside of the provider. So anything within this start tag and end tag. So if we had another app called shopping page, so long as this is within the children, as long as this is within the start and the end tag of the Auth0 provider, whatever other components you put in here will also have access to that context, okay? So let's jump into app and let's consume that context. So in order to consume the context, you would go up here to the top, the beginning of the component for app, and you would say something like const, some empty braces, equals, use Auth0. And what this is doing is it's getting context from the parent component, which happens to be the provider. Although in actuality, the provider can be many levels above your component, and you can still use this use Auth0 in order to pull context. So those providers just provide information, and then you use this statement, use Auth0, to connect and get functionality from that provider. Okay, and Auth0 is going to have this import, and I will paste that in class for the people that don't have autocomplete working right now. Oh, and I apologize. This isn't square brackets. This is the curly braces. Because use Auth0 returns a dictionary, or sorry, returns an object that has any number of properties. So we need to use the curly braces. Now to see what use Auth0 returns, we can, if our editor is working, we can command click into it. If you can't command click, then just follow along on my screen. All I'm going to do is show what all this provider returns. Okay. So there's a number of different properties that the provider returns. One of them we'll look at here in a minute called get access token silently. But the most important one that we care about right now is login with redirect. So if you have your Auth0 provider set up correctly, the provider will give us a method that allows us to redirect users to log in. So we're going to start with that. So let's go to app.js, and then let's pull out the login with redirect. Let's pull that method out from the use Auth0 context. Okay. And then right before we return the component, let's say login with redirect. And hit save. So again, we're using the Auth0 context. We're pulling the login with redirect function out of it, and we're just calling the function. We're calling it after our use effect because we don't want our component to partially declare its hooks. So we're putting it right here before our final return. Okay. So now if we go back to our browser and we look at our React app, let's make sure we're running npm start. When the app loads, you should be immediately kicked to this login page. Let me know when folks see this login page. Cool, a couple of you guys already got it. That's awesome. Isn't it so easy for the folks that are wanting to use username and password? Isn't this so easy? All we have to do is import a library. We've got what, 1, 2, 3 lines of code. It's just so easy. I don't know why you would do it any other way. Anybody else not seeing this? Okay, so if you're sitting at this page, let's use the continue with Google. I think most people have a Google account, so we'll hit continue with Google, click whatever the email address is. It's going to ask you for some consent, some access to your profile. Now, I just want to call out why this is asking for access to your profile. The reason why is back here in index.js. We've given this login box the scope of current user. In Auth0 speak, that means that we're going to read some information about that user. We want, whenever the login is complete, we want to have information about that user. If we didn't include this scope, then we wouldn't see this page here where it's asking for our permission to get some of our info. But then we'd kind of be shooting ourselves in the foot because we want to know who the user is. We want some information about them. Okay. So I'm going to add that back in. Okay, now we can hit accept. And we're back to this page. But notice that it just immediately kicked me back into the login cycle. So after you finish logging in, I'll do it again. It briefly goes back to Nathan's web store, but then we go back into the re-authentication loop. And the reason for that is, if we go into app.js, the reason is we're always logging in with redirect. We're continually hitting this function. Even when we get redirected back to our app, when the flow is done, we still go and log in with redirect. So we need something to stop that process if they've already logged in, if they're already authenticated. Okay. Good question. Yep. Put it in a conditional statement, right? What will be the thing that we test? How will we know if they've been authenticated? It's kind of a trick question because I don't think anybody would know this. Actually, you could get really clever, and I think you get redirected with something in the URL. So you could check to see if when you come back to the web page, if you have something additional in the URL, that would be a great. That's not what I'm going to show you though, but that would be a way to stop the login. But you're absolutely right. You want to make a conditional statement here. And the way to tell if a user is logged in is to pull another special property from the Auth0 context called is authenticated. So Auth0 will also not only redirect you to log in, but it'll also tell you if the user has been logged in. So how would we want to write this statement to prevent folks from getting in this loop, this endless cycle of authentication? So folks know the is authenticated is going to return a Boolean, a true or a false. So how would we prevent folks from constantly getting sent to log in and redirect? A ternary? Oh, that's fancy. So what are you thinking? Like down here? So I kind of like, I don't know. I'm not very smart. and I tend to think in pretty simple terms. So if else kind of resonates with me. So I'm going to go with Kyle's first, and then Brielle, we'll try doing a ternary and see if we can make that work. So what would our if statement be? Oh, Kyle, you already put it in. Yep. So if not is authenticated, then we want to log in with redirect. Okay. So let's see what happens now. I'm going to continue with Google, get redirected back to my app. Whoa, wait, what happened? I mean, the logic makes sense. So let's look through it. If you're not authenticated, you should log in with redirect. So there is another property that comes from Auth0 called isLoading, which is another Boolean, which means that the Auth0 provider hasn't finished loading. It hasn't finished all of its checks. For the people that know what cookies are and local storage, it hasn't finished reading from the cookie. It hasn't finished if you're using cookies, and it hasn't finished reading from local storage. So we need to add another check and make sure that Auth0 isn't still initializing. And the way that we could do that is we can do a check up here. So if they're still loading, then we're going to return, well, let's just return them. No, no, let's return a P, and let's say something like loading ... So isLoading is another property provided to us by Auth0. So now if we hit continue with Google, we sign in again. The endless cycle stops. Is everybody able to make their endless login loop stop with the isLoading check?
Nathan, I did, but it happened too quick for me to really understand why. Because I clicked continue and it popped, and then I was like, oh, I have to put in the email, and then it popped again, and I was there.
Mm-hmm.
So
that's good.
That way? Okay.
That's all you want. Yep. When they're authenticated, you want the login loop to stop. You want to just be back at the web page. Okay. So this is cool, but what do we have? We know that they're authenticated because the isAuthenticated check is saying that they're authenticated, but what is the proof of their authentication? What do we have now that they've actually logged in? Well, we can now have access to another special property from the Auth0 context called user. And this is where the fun really starts. So if we grab the user from the Auth0 context, and we come down here to, let's just throw it up here. So we'll make a JSON stringify, and we'll take a look at what that object returns. Okay. So we've got the user for the context, and we're going to JSON stringify it. Okay, now the front page should look a little different. So this is the information about the user that logged in. You can see we get some cool stuff from it. We get a nickname, we get a name. If we're signing in with Google, we even got a picture. We got an email. There's some kind of email verified property on there as well. But now the front end knows something about the user. So let's make an image and let's load that picture from the user. So user.picture. There we go. So now we've added Nathan's ugly mug, a little bit of personalization to the front of our app. We could get even fancier. We could put it in a bar and have it up at the top right next to a profile icon that they could click on. The possibilities are endless. Okay. Is everybody able to get some user info after the user is logged in?
Did you put user up top?
Yes, user is coming from the Auth0
Okay,
context. So
yeah.
it's not a variable. Yep.
I didn't see it, but I figured because I was getting undefined. Thank you.
Yep. And just so everyone knows, I know what these things are that come out of the context because I've worked with this before. If you want to explore all the different things that Auth0 returns, there is a documentation page for the library we're using. So if we go to package.json, we grab the Auth0 React, that's the name of the library. And we look, there is some great documentation about all the different things that this library does. So I'm just showing all of you what I have used in practice. Okay. So we're going to stop here for a second, and I want to show in slow motion what's happening when someone actually logs in, because there's a whole process going on. I had mentioned that this authentication flow, the spec for it is the OpenID Connect spec. But underneath, there's a lot of other moving pieces, a lot of other technology at play here. I want to just slow down and show what that looks like in the browser. So you don't need to do this on your end. This is just to, but before we jump into doing that, there's one other critical piece that you can get from the Auth0 context, and it's called logout. The reason why I remember it is because I need to log out in order to show you what the login process looks like. So if we grab the logout function from the Auth0 context, we could do something like make a button called logout. It has an on-click handler. And all it does is call logout. So if we wanted to add the ability to log out, that's how you would do it. Okay, so I'm going to click log out. And you'll notice that I'm greeted with the login window as we would expect, because I'm no longer authenticated and I'm tripping that if statement. So I get redirected with login. Okay. Now I'm going to pull open the network inspector and try to do my best to show the different pieces that are happening behind the scenes. So I'm going to hit continue with Google. Before I do that, the reason why we end up on this login page is it's simply a redirect. So that function here, login with redirect, all that's doing is a window.location change. So if you guys have covered window.location as a way to send users to different places in the browser, so window.location, try to pull this up. Window.location equals https google.com. So if you set that variable, window.location, it will cause the browser to go to wherever it is that you've entered. And all this login with redirect, all it's doing is changing window.location. There's nothing fancy going on there. So let me back up. All right. Okay. So we got redirected to the site, nothing fancy going on. When we hit continue with Google, this is where the Auth0 magic takes over. So Auth0 handles the connection with Google for you. All you need to do is buy into the Auth0 platform, their libraries and their dashboards and all that sort of stuff. So when I click on my email, you'll see that briefly there was a string in the URL and it went away. And I want to just show what that string actually was. Here we go. So briefly, very, very, very briefly, when you finish logging in and it goes back to your app, there's a code in the URL. This code is a one-time code, and it's used as a way of once the user has logged into your app and returned to your app, it comes back with this code. What Auth0, the library that we installed, we did the npm install. What Auth0 is doing behind the scenes in our app is it's snagging this code and it's exchanging it for the information that is held in that user object. So this code can only be used once, and it's used by your app for a brief second after the user gets redirected back to you. Because the next call, if I could find it in here, there's the code. Here we go. The next call that uses that token is a call to your Auth0 token endpoint. So when the user returns back to your app, they're given a code. The code is then exchanged for a token. We're going to talk about tokens for a second. So is everybody, is that what's, no, so like an href, yeah, it's a link. It technically modifies the window.location. But when you set window.location, you're not necessarily using a href or a link tag. Or I guess more accurately, you're not using an anchor tag. When you modify window.location, it's not as if someone has clicked on something. It just takes them there. There is no event. There is no additional steps required. It just immediately rewrites whatever's in the browser and takes them to that URL. Okay. So we need to talk about tokens really quick because these are really important for the next part. So after that code gets exchanged for a token, there's two kinds of tokens. There's an ID token and there's an access token. Now, what is populating that user variable, so if we go back over here, this user that we get from the context, the information that goes into that box is really coming from this ID token. And this ID token conforms to a specification known as the JSON Web Token specification. And I'll show you what that means. If you take everything that's in here, you take all of the stuff that came back when you exchanged the code for an access token. There's a website called jwt.io, JSONWebToken.io, and it has this handy dandy debugger here. And if we paste in that whole string and decrypt it, you can see this is all the same information as what was contained inside of that user box. What's important about this token and what you should take away from this is that that token is immutable. It's signed by Auth0. So the front end can verify that the contents of this token are cryptographically secure, that it was issued from an accredited provider, in this case Auth0, which by proxy came from Google, this token is valid. And that's what all of this nonsense over here, all of this proves. There's a signature that is included in this token that you can use to validate that the information that was sent to you when the user logged in is authentic. It's valid. Okay, which is why this authentication flow is so secure. It's because it has that encryption, it has that verification built into it, so that when someone logs in, you can prove that that they did in fact log in. Okay. If for some reason you wanted to see that token, there is a way to get it, and I will print it out here. So I'm going to make a H3. This is the ID token. And you can get access to that raw ID token by stringifying the users dot oh, sorry. There's another method called get ID token claims that you can take from Auth0. And if you call that, it returns a promise which contains whatever the ID token was, and that was returned in the browser. And if you then return the underscore raw, Auth0 really doesn't want you to mess with the ID token directly. I'm just showing this for education purposes. Because the user object represents everything that came in the ID token, so the chances that you actually need to inspect the ID token yourself are pretty slim, but you can still do it. So now if I refresh here, yes, because this is returning a promise, we need to dress this up a little bit. So yeah, bear with me for a second. Don't feel like you need to do this. So I'm going to create a state variable, and then inside of my use effect, which just fires when we first render the app to the screen, I'm going to move all this promise logic into that. And then when we get the token, we're going to do a set ID token, pass it the raw token. So now the ID token box will be hydrated. And if we refresh, there we go. So this is what I pasted over on jwt.io. That is the raw ID token that you get after the users finish their authentication. Okay. Any questions? Thoughts? Is this looking cool to anybody? Are they thinking of ways they might be able to use this on their capstone? I'm gonna have to keep prefacing before we get to the username and passwords. I'm gonna have to keep giving my sales pitch. This is miles and miles ahead more secure than you rolling your own username and password. And a lot of it has to do with this ID token, but also the fact that you don't have to maintain any of this. You just get to reap the benefits of Google and GitHub and all of those sites, maintaining that information for you.
Wow, imagine being able to just set this up and let it go and not having to generate tokens all the time and store your user IDs and passwords and not have to worry about any of that. So I'm just co-signing your sales pitch here. You know, please consider really integrating this into your capstone instead of doing it yourself.
You know, I would so love to hear that everybody is convinced so we can not talk about username and password and we can spend that time on something else. But if folks really want to see username and password a little bit, I
And
use
I feel
Hope
like we
Play in
kind
the
of
way.
have to though. I feel like you have to at least show it. Like heavily discourage, you know, stop signs, big red X, please don't do this. But like, you know, like I gotta at least talk about it a little bit.
Yeah, you're right. Part of it is second guessing myself in terms of, do I want to be the one responsible if I made the example incorrectly? And then I'm called into court and they go, he's the one that told us how to salt passwords.
Yeah, that seems like a very likely scenario in Hack Upstate Court with Judge Jesse over here.
I'm just trying to cover all my bases, you know, I don't need any more legal trouble. So that is another good call out, Kyle. If you don't want to manage username and password, but you're still in love with the idea, Auth0 will manage your username and passwords for you, and they'll do it in a secure fashion. You just have to buy into the whole Kool-Aid. Like you have to do the whole Auth0 deal. So if you go to Auth0, there is a section for authentication. If I blow this up, there is a section for authentication with username and password. If it will let me click in. Okay. And then you go into, let's see, yeah, authentication. So there is a username, password. Actually, I might be lying to you. No, it does work. They will manage your username, password for you. So you would just follow all the steps here on the screen. Yep. So if you wanted to use that, you totally can. And the reason why it's showing that is if you go into your applications and you go click into the settings there's a connections tab here and a bunch of toggles. If you don't want to allow username, password, you just toggle that off. Like for my example, I probably just wanted to show Google. So now that I have those two toggled off and I click log out, now all I'm presented with is a continue with Google icon. So you control all of that from this Auth0 dashboard. What different kinds of providers you want to allow, and there's a whole bunch. If you go into authentication, there's a ton of different social connections that you can create. So Auth0 will have the GitHub and the Google already set up for you, but you can hit create new. You can add a Facebook sign in. There's even an Apple sign in. I mean, the list is, there's a lot on here. Great question. Other thoughts, questions?
I had one quick question. So if I wanted to set this up for my just like my administrative page about submitting forms to the database, but I mean we put the authorization tags around the whole app. If I just wanted it for a page that isn't called anywhere else, like where would I put that on just like a single page that isn't called anywhere?
So you kind of have two options. As you pointed out, because we're encapsulating app with the provider, that doesn't mean that you have to encapsulate the entire application. So like you're alluding to, you can put the Auth0 provider just around the components that you want to have users authenticated for. The other, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, but the component isn't called anywhere else. It's just its own page that you have to
Oh,
know to
like
go to that
React
extension.
router. Uh-huh. You would still want to dress that page or whatever is rendering that component. You would still want to dress that with this Auth0 provider. Does that make sense? Am I answering that correctly?
So I'd need to call the component to another page that I could wrap it in the authorization.
So I'm trying to think of how you've got it set up. Are you using React Router?
Yes.
Okay, so with React Router, you would, each different route takes in a component, right, to render when the user visits that route.
So actually, I should clarify, the React router is not involved with the administration page. There is no route to that page.
From your main app.
Yes.
Got it. Is your admin page, is your admin site a React app?
Yes.
That you would, then you wouldn't put the Auth0 provider around your main app with your router. You would put the Auth0 provider around whatever is rendering your admin page, whatever is rendering that part of your application. Does that make sense?
I'll have to set up a one-on-one to show you what I have set up and how it needs to be adjusted.
Okay. I mean, it's not a completely separate app, is it? Is it in its own Create React app?
No, it's not a completely separate app. It's just it's it's just a slash form, but you have to know to add that to the browser, the slash form to get to that page.
Got it. Yeah, I mean, if it's rendering React components, then you can definitely hook up the Auth0 provider for just that page, just that admin set of components. But yeah, let's talk about it. Other questions or thoughts? The other thing I want to call out is that you have complete flexibility over checking for authentication and redirecting users to log in. So if you want to do that from within the component, specifically on just apps that need authentication, then this is kind of where the ternary might come in handy. So let's say that we want to make the login with redirect a button instead of just automatically forcing them to log in if they're not already logged in. So let's put a couple of buttons. So actually, let's do this. So let's do our ternary because somebody was asking for a ternary. So we'll do an is authenticated ternary. And if they are authenticated, we're going to return all of the stuff that we've been showing. If they're not authenticated, we're going to return a div that contains a button that says log in. And when they click on it, it is going to call the redirect. So they go come up here and steal that. It's going to call the login with redirect function. And we'll wrap all this in parentheses. There we go. Okay, so if they, actually, I don't need that. Oh, we need a closing curly brace. So we have a closing curly brace for our ternary, right? Is authenticated. What am I missing? Oh, I need to put this div inside of here. So if you are authenticated, here's all the stuff that you're going to return. What is wrong with my, why is this giving me a squiggly? Okay, let me back up. I'm just going to do this over again because I'm really screwed something up here. Delete all this. Delete all of that. All right, now we're back to square one. If we refresh, let's take that out for now. Cannot read property raw of undefined. Oh, because they're not authenticated. So you can only get the token ID claims if they're already authenticated. So I'm going to add this check in here. Okay. There we go. Now we're back. Okay. So let's change what's displayed based on whether they're logged in. So we'll go back and we'll add our ternary for is authenticated. And there's that. We'll close that. Okay, so if they are authenticated, we're going to return this div. Otherwise, we're going to return some button that allows them to log in. Oh, it's still giving me a squiggly. I'm not sure why. It's because I need to wrap this. Is there a ternary expert in chats? Anybody that can see something that I'm doing obviously wrong here? We've got a, oh.
Would it be is authenticated true? This
Is
if true, then this.
It's authenticated is returning a true or a false.
But don't you have to set it to write the ternary operator?
So something like this?
Yeah. No?
I'm still not happy about that. All right, let's go nuclear. If we can't figure it out, let's go nuclear. We're going to get rid of everything. And we're just going to do something real simple. Return. And it's going to be a div. And we're going to do a is authenticated check. And if you are authenticated, we're going to say, yep, you're authenticated. Otherwise, we're going to return a P. Is that, does that look reasonable to everyone? Look like a valid ternary? Yep, so we're authenticated. So something's going on with my formatting for all this. And to double check it, I'm going to take that huge block out. Oh, is it because we need to have this wrapped in a div? Yep. So this by itself is not enough. We need to at least have one encapsulating element. So let me go ahead and plop that back in. Yeah, okay. Well, we all learned something new today. If you try to drop immediately into a ternary, it doesn't work, even though you're only returning a single element in either case. Kind of blows my mind, but either way, we all learned something new. Okay, so if we are authenticated, we're going to show the store like normal. Otherwise, we're going to return a button that allows them to log in. Let's go back here. Okay, so it's showing me everything as expected. If I click log out, we're still getting redirected because we have this check here. So we can get rid of that safely. because we're managing the login ourselves. Okay, so now we have the login here. So we can click on login and we can control that ourselves using our own button and using our own ternary to check and selectively render things. So if you have something more complicated and you're rendering a big app and you only want to show portions of that app, this would be the way to do that. Okay. I think we are due for a break. So let's go ahead and take 10 and come back at 7:43. Kelly, were you,
Dude,
did
oh
you
my
learn a
God.
little something?
It was driving me nuts. I kept looking at your ternary. I was like, no, I know that's right. I love ternaries. And that's the right syntax. You have the question mark, you have the colon in. It's like, I know this is right. What's wrong with it? And it was the div.
I was having a little existential crisis. I was like, do I really not remember how to do this?
No, I knew you were right. And I felt so bad. I was like, God, what's wrong with it? And it was, you got to return something.
This is crazy though. Like you would think maybe this is a JavaScript thing. Wait, no. Oh, okay, good. Yeah, so even though I'm returning, you would agree, in both cases, I'm returning a single element regardless, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, Webpack just really doesn't like
It's not
it.
like that at all. Mm-mm. We all learned something.
Are you
today.
a JavaScript person or a TypeScript person?
I'm a JavaScript person. I've heard things about TypeScript though. I've done a little bit with it, so I'm thinking about just making the transition to TypeScript. Do you have a preference?
Yeah, I like TypeScript way more than JavaScript.
Okay.
And I feel like this is one of those situations because I think that TypeScript is smart enough to understand that the return, like it will do that a little bit of forward analysis. Yeah, I've never seen this. And I feel like like on the job, I've done this before and never gotten bitten by it. So crazy.
Yeah, that was a wild error. I'm glad it happened though. I really did learn something there. That was neat.
Good. I'm glad. Yeah, I'm glad that. I think one of the bad impressions that I give when I'm doing this is that you just kind of will learn these things and know them, and you'll never run into a situation where you have to. I make it look easy because I practice all this in the morning, and it's like fresh in my head. But yeah, this is what happens every day.
Absolutely. I mean, that's part of programming. You know, you're always going to run into like weird stuff. And sometimes it's good. You're going to search for, you're going to Google it, you're going to look for things, and it's going to turn out to be a div. And that's just part of the whole deal. And it's how you handle like frustrations like that is part of the soft skills of being a developer.
Right.
I think, like, can you bounce back from something like that, learn from it and keep moving, or does something like that entirely throw you off the game? And, does that just like wreck your whole coding session?
So you're thinking, Kelly, next cohort, you're going to teach a class called soft skills. And for it, you're going to intentionally give folks bugs and coach them on. I think that'd be a great module.
I mean, honestly, if people would be interested in that, yeah, that would be a really cool module, I think, to introduce.
I think that would be a really good one.
Yeah, thanks. It's a really good idea. We will pitch that to Jesse and see if we can get around to that for cohort 3. That'd be cool.
How not to just like freak out. That could be like slide number 1, all caps. How to not freak out. How to not lose your cool.
Slide number 1 is you will never learn everything about web development. You cannot know everything about web development. There will never be a time that you don't have to Google or Stack Overflow or ask a coworker or something. You will never know the answers, all of them. And if you can't deal with that, this career is probably not for you. Soft skills.
Soft skills.
I'll work on that for cohort 3 this week.
I think that's one of the things that has surprised me the most. And one of the things that I just don't really think about, having done it for a while, is yeah, you want to feel like you know everything. Like, for example, this Auth0. Like when I'm sharing, here's a provider, and here's some of the stuff it returns. Like you immediately want to go, oh, I need to memorize. I need to know all this stuff. It's like, dude, I only know it because I just I refreshed myself this morning. Like,
Right.
that is yeah. You should definitely do a sales pitch for the soft skills. Maybe it could go like mid cohort, right when people are starting to hit that. Like they know enough and they're
they're a few weeks into JavaScript and they're like, what is this? What is this? What am I doing
right
here?
after Java. Yeah.
Why is 5 + 5 55? What happened here? My HTML and my CSS were so straightforward. It was excellent. Now you've introduced this other thing. What's going on? And then I come in like, it's gonna be all right.
Does anybody do that?
Does anybody do that?
Like, does anybody do the whole JavaScript WTF deal, like where they show all the weird? Do you know if anybody does that during the cohort?
I don't know if anybody does a specific lecture or a specific class on like, here are all the things that are weird about JavaScript. That does sound pretty interesting, though. That may be something to also think about. Like, just here's a bunch of weird stuff to look out for. Okay, Latonia says that I watched a video on it. Awesome. Probably a good one.
What is the good one? Like, is it like that equals that? No, it's that equals. No, go back. No, I don't even remember it. I don't.
Okay.
Again, TypeScript. there's your sales for TypeScript.
Right. Just use TypeScript.
Oh, Gus. Of course, Gus.
He would.
Yeah, Gus wanted to do TypeScript so bad.
Which
I don't blame him, but I don't really feel like the adoption is there. Like, do you feel like TypeScript is king over JavaScript?
I mean, I don't. Like, I understand wanting to teach it, and I think he raises some really valid points, you know, especially when you run into these kinds of like weird little errors that, you know, TypeScript would probably catch ahead of time. But I just really think maybe JavaScript's still the way to go. It's a good question.
Yeah, it's interesting because I've done one-on-ones, and one of the questions that I always ask people is, what is the data type? What is the thing that's actually being returned? What is the shape of something? And not of any student's fault whatsoever, but most of the time I get blank eye, like, because it's all this duck typing, all of this. So that, I guess that's one of the things that I feel like we're kind of doing a disservice, but I don't know.
I'm still waiting for cohort 5 when we switch to Python entirely. We just ditched JavaScript. Had enough of this. Going to Python. You get lists, you get dictionaries, you get tuples.
So we'll do front end rendering with Python. We'll just template it all out in Python. Yeah, I like the sound of that. Jinja templates. Oh gosh, Python is my deal. Like, I really don't do as much front end development as I used to. I would be thrilled if there was a Python.
Me too. I've been
Python's
like slowly
Django?
learning Python on my own, and I think it's a really neat language. I'd love to see it get taught more around here. Yeah.
Do you use the optional types? So with Python 3.5-ish or so, you could do TypeScript style deals where you can type. Yeah, you can type function signatures. You can type return arguments. It will do, not compile obviously, but like it will do a static analysis and ensure. Oh, are you really passing a string? Are you really passing? Like, it is. If you want to go overboard, it's pretty cool. Dude, no, Jahil, Python is not. Oh, yeah, okay, all right. Yeah. We got a
great one, thank you.
We got a wise guy in here, and I just fell for it.
Love that.
I was about to go off on a spiel and say, no, it's not. It's very flexible, but
I did Python in high school, but it wasn't 3. It was like 2.7. I mean, it's different. Yeah. So.
The old days back when we didn't have format strings and our print was a keyword and not a function.
Yeah.
Print with the without the parentheses. Savage, barbaric times. How did we ever? Yeah, exactly. How did we ever manage?
Oh, also just a reminder, it's been 10 minutes now.
Oh yeah, where's everybody at? Did we scare them away with other languages?
We were here. We were just listening.
Oh, okay.
Cool.
Okay. So let's wrap up. I had planned to jump into a little bit of the back end, but I think we're going to save that for tomorrow. I'm already still screen sharing. Does anybody have any questions about what we've covered so far tonight?
Wait, you're not going to cover the username and password that we do without the help of Auth0?
Oh, not tonight.
That's a different day.
We'll,
oh, okay. Cool.
Yeah. The next thing that we are going to talk about is how to prove identity on the server. So if you'll notice, what we've done is we've established identity in the browser. And I guess I'll turn that around and ask the class. The front end knows who the user is. We have a box called user. We know things about them. How would you share that information with the back end? Because actually, I remember seeing in chat, some people were talking about primary keys in the dictionary and, yep, send the token there. That's actually a really acute observation. So I've kind of hyped up this token concept as being cryptographically secure, kind of this immutable object that proves the user's identity. So that's exactly what we're going to talk about tomorrow, is we're going to talk about how we would use that token with our Node.js apps, because to be clear, we haven't established identity on the back end without telling the back end who the user is in a secure way. If we just say the user is, if we just send the email in a post body, let's say, if we're checking out and what we do is we hit an endpoint and we send the user's email, we haven't really proven that that user is the one that's checking out. Anybody could make a post request with their email and check out. So we'll dig into that a little bit more tomorrow. We'll talk about the Node.js, the backend portion, and it does involve the tokens. But there's actually 2 types of tokens. We've looked at one today, and we'll look at the other one tomorrow. Okay, other questions? All right. So I have a choice for the homework tonight. Obviously, I really want folks to go this route for their authentication. And if I have started to convince anybody that this is the right way to do it, and I'm telling you this is probably one of the best ways to do it, please do this. For the homework, what I'd like for you to do tonight, I would like everybody on their capstone to do some form of authentication, even if it is just as if you're using React in your capstone for your front end. I'd like you to try to attempt this homework. I'd like you to try to plug in with Auth0. So that means going through the steps that we went through today in class, setting up the Auth0 tenant, setting up the application, installing the Auth0 React library, and finding some spot in their capstone to use with authentication. if for some reason you don't want to do this, let me know, and I have a different homework assignment. I could give you that. But I would really like folks to attempt this on their capstone. And if you fail, it's not a big deal. But I'd really like folks to try to do this and practice using Auth0 for their capstone. Now, you don't need to use authentication for your whole capstone. Like Brielle pointed out, you can limit where you're checking authentication. So you have direct control. If we go back to app.js, you have direct control over these functions where you check for authentication. You have direct control over the logout button. You have direct control over the login button. So if you don't want to make the entire capstone require authentication, then just make a small piece of it require authentication. And what piece that is, I'm going to leave up to you for your own interpretation. Anybody have any questions? Susan, so you don't have any React. Okay. I'll talk to you after this. Anybody else have any other questions? Anybody?
Kind of related to that, it looked like there was documentation for just JavaScript when you were showing us how you could click React, and there was a lot of documentation. I have a project that is not yet in React. I'm not sure if at some point I'll bring it into React, but another one that's going to need to have usernames and passwords because it will need to store individualized data for each user. So
Okay. Yeah, let me check that out really quick. If you just hit this, is there a plain JavaScript section? Yeah, there is. It doesn't look too involved either.
would it be okay to do that on the other project for my homework instead of on the capstone, or?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. If you are, so a lot of the concepts are going to carry over, things like where you need to set the client ID, the domain. I don't actually know what so let's see, what are some of the methods that, oh wait, is this for the server? Yes, this requires a server.
Yeah, that's what I
because the
need it for
server's
though,
good.
because individual data is going to be on the database. So
Kyle, are you doing for your capstone, is it not a Create React app?
my capstone is, yeah, and I can do, I can make I mean, as long as I can do it so people don't have to log in, they can use it without logging in. I can do it on my capstone too. That's fine. But I do want to at some point set this up on my other project too as like a, what do you call it? Not profile, portfolio piece.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Try to do it on your Create React app. I honestly don't want to do support for this stuff because I haven't tried it. Had I tried it, I would be more than down. But just real quick, I want to show folks, here's how you would do authentication for just a small piece of your app. So let's pretend like, so let me back out all of the, actually, let me commit this so you guys have the code up on GitHub. So you can use this as a reference. You guys also have been following along, so you should have a copy of this for yourselves. But so let me do a git commit am changes to use Auth0. And then I'll push origin main. Okay, so all the stuff that I did during class is now up on Nathan's web store in main. So if you want to reference that, you can. You also have a copy as well. Okay, so let's talk about how you would just restrict a certain piece of this. So let me take out some of this stuff. Take out all the stuff that depends on Auth0 here. Okay. And then we don't need this. Okay. And we don't need this. And we don't need this. So let's pretend like this, and we don't need this. And we don't need this. There we go. So let's pretend like this is your capstone and you've got it already set up the way that you want. Maybe you don't want users to be authenticated for all of it. Let's pretend like we want to create a feedback box. So we'll call it feedback form. And in order to provide feedback, you need to be logged in. So let's go and create a new component. We'll call this feedback.js, feedback form. Okay. Export function feedback form. It returns feedback. Back in here, we'll import it. Okay. Take a look here. So I'm going to run the app again so we can see the feedback form is correctly rendering. There we go. All right. So our app is completely unauthenticated, but we have this feedback form down here, and we'll do something like we'll put, change this to a div, and maybe we'll create a form, and we'll put some input elements in here. It's like type equals text. We'll give this a label, and we'll say, give us your feedback. Okay. All right. So we do want to add authentication to the feedback form because we want to snag who the user is so that we can identify the feedback with that user. So to do that, this is where we would plug in the Auth0. So we could say const some stuff equals use Auth0. So we'll bring back that import. And then we'll grab the is authenticated and the is loading. And then we'll do our ternary here, is authenticated. If they are authenticated, we want to show them this stuff. So we'll wrap that in a div. Otherwise, we're going to give them a button. We don't need is loading. We'll use the login with redirect. So we'll give them a button. That on click takes them to redirect. There we go. Okay, so we are just focusing on authentication for this one piece right here. So now if we go back, we refresh, feedback form is replaced with the login button. So users don't have to click login. They don't have to give us feedback if they don't want, but if they decide to, they'll click login. They'll continue with Google. They'll get redirected back to our app. All of a sudden the feedback form shows up for them. So this is, if you don't care about authentication for your whole website, let's say you have a landing page and you just want folks to see your landing page, don't worry about anything. This is how you would do that. Put whatever is authenticating behind the scenes or nested away wherever you want that authentication piece to live. So that's what I'd really like folks to do for their homework is find a way, albeit creative. If you need ideas, I'm more than happy, and I'm sure Kelly is too, more than happy to help you brainstorm different places, different use cases. We could even come up with a toy, trivial, whatever. I just want people to practice logging in with Auth0 and using it on their capstone. Much rather you do it on your capstone than me give you a really contrived example and you know, you don't really walk away with knowing how to do this in your own code. Any questions? For the folks that aren't using Create React App, I'll talk to you, Susan, and then anybody else, just send me a message and we'll find something else. All good. No other questions? We got 32 minutes left. So I'm here for questions. If folks want to start looking at the homework, I'm going to go ahead and get it up on Google Classroom. And then if anybody has any questions, just let me know. And also, if you feel like you got a handle on this and just want to dive right in, you're more than welcome to drop as well too. Oh, yeah, we said we were going to talk about environment variables. Yeah. So we need environment variables tomorrow for the backend. The backend is actually going to take a legit API key. It's called something else in Auth0 terminology, but it's going to take in something sensitive. So we're going to have to talk about environment variables in the backend tomorrow anyways. Are you guys talking about environment variables on the backend or the front end? Both? Where do you have sensitive? Go ahead.
For me, it's in the front. No, it's in the back. It's being called from the back to the front. Yes, 2 of them. I thought Kyle said she had 2. Is that right, Kyle?
I have one in the front end, and at some point I may have one in the back end, but the maps one is to display a map on the front end, so it's in the front.
So that API key you use for your map, is that sensitive?
Max said that it wasn't, but then when I accidentally committed it, I got a message from Google telling me to regenerate it, which I did.
You got a message from
attempted to
Google,
hide
or you
it
got a
after
message
class,
from
and I
GitHub?
couldn't get it working once. I mean, I think there's something wrong with my import or whatever, but now I'm in React, so it's going to be different anyway. So
You got an error from Google or from GitHub?
Google
Google
sent me an email. Yeah. I hadn't even
So-
realized, 'cause I've been taking it in and out every time, and I knew I was going to forget to do that at some point, and I did, and they sent me an email. They gave me specific
that doesn't-
instructions on what to do, and I followed them.
Maybe you weren't using the right one. Maybe you weren't using the right API key. But if it runs in the browser, it is not sensitive. It's not secret. So
Yeah, that's what Max said. I don't know.
yeah, everything in the browser is public. You can't hide things if it gets used by JavaScript in the front end.
I mean, it also suggested that I limit what addresses could call it, which makes sense now that I have the Heroku app. I guess I could put that address in there, but I was using localhost at that point, so it didn't make sense to do that.
It's the same thing as Auth0. Auth0 wants you to fill in those 3 boxes on the settings of what addresses can call your login box.
Right.
Yeah,
But it only had one
I-
option. You can only pick one, so then I can't. If you're still developing it and then pushing it to Heroku, is it going to let you use it on your own computer or on localhost?
Yeah, when you deploy, you'd want to have the deployed address and whatever their box is. I don't know. I haven't worked with the Maps API very much. That might just be a good one-on-one or something to dig into. But definitely let Max take a crack at that, because I bet he's gonna know more about it than me. But we'll cover the backend environment variables tomorrow, and yeah, those shouldn't be committed to GitHub. They should come through an environment variable. So like Heroku will hydrate that environment variable for you, and you'll pull it in, just like the database URL, just like the port. So we'll talk about the backend for sure tomorrow. I don't think we'll talk about the front end, because the front end is kind of a weird, and like we pointed out, yeah, everything that goes in the front end, everybody's gonna see. So it's not like you would just put a sensitive value in there. I guess I should also call out that if you really do not, absolutely under any circumstances, do not want to have authentication in your capstone for the demo day, just prove to me that you can install Auth0, authenticate a small piece of your app, and then we could take it out after the homework if you absolutely do not want to use it. Okay, homework's posted. All right, last call for any questions, comments, thoughts. Otherwise, we'll end a few minutes early and give folks back the time.
I'm just trying to research what the best way to receive the information from the contact form would be, like somehow have it emailed to you, or not the feedback form type of example that you just did.
Yeah, let's so for wiring up functionality, you might want to wait till tomorrow,
Okay.
because what we're going to want to do is the back end will probably want to send that feedback or store it in a database or something
I'm
like that.
thinking you could store it in the database, but you probably also want to get like the information emailed to you or somehow sent to you, so you'd be aware that it was put into the database. So
Right. And so far with the tools that we have, we really don't have a way to do that from the front end. We can't, unless we plugged in an email API or something, which I highly doubt. Anyways, we kind of don't have enough to do the functionality you're describing. So for the homework, let's just start slow, focus on the
just getting
login box.
here only if you
Yep.
are logged in. Okay, that makes sense.
And doing something based off of whether they're authenticated. It doesn't have to be any rich functionality, just show hiding something, or you could display the user's picture or username or any of those things. And then for the folks that aren't using React for their capstone, give me some time tonight to kind of noodle on it, because I need to think of a way to incorporate authentication into an example, and then I'll get back to you. It's not due till Sunday at midnight anyway, so it won't be there's no rush. Yeah, Susan, I'm actually just thinking that I might take 15 minutes and spin up another dummy app and then give that to you, and use that as the basis. Yeah, because I really want to. I was really hoping to get you into an app that you were using, like Capstone, but we could do a dummy app. That's fine too. Okay. Well, if there's no other questions, then let's go ahead and call it for tonight, and I'll give you guys the time back. And I will see all of you tomorrow. Tomorrow, we're going to talk about the server side portion of this. So for the folks that have Node.js backends, we're going to talk about how to do authentication from the backend and talk a little bit about authorization as well. So that's the plan for tomorrow. And then I could talk about username and password storage tomorrow as well. Something that Jesse had thrown out at me as an idea is we can take Thursday as a class. We have the option on Thursday to use it for group capstone work, kind of like we did last week. Does anybody find that idea appealing? We can use it not only for deployments, but we could also just use it for general problems that people are running into. We could use it for authentication. I had a lot of fun on the last one. It has my vote. I just want to make sure that folks feel like, and I don't think that we're gonna have any problem tomorrow covering all the material that I wanted to cover. So if that sounds good to folks, then we'll plan on doing that on Thursday. Okay, cool. Yeah, I had a blast last time. I'd love to do that again. All right, I'll stop talking. Have a great rest of your night, and I will talk to you all tomorrow, same time. See ya.